The vampire king had not tasted food in 300 years, but tonight, the scent of roasted garlic and thyme made his dead heart stir with something dangerously close to longing. Yvain Jordanou stood in the shadows of the alley behind Belmont Street, watching the small restaurant through ancient eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall. He shouldn't be here. A king did not wander mortal streets unguarded, did not allow himself to be drawn by something as pedestrian as the smell of human cooking. Yet here he stood, pale as winter moonlight, his white hair catching the faint glow of the street lamp, drawn forward by a compulsion he couldn't name. The restaurant was nothing special. A hole-in-the-wall establishment with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that read, "Beatrice's Kitchen," in faded red letters. Through the smudged window, he could see a young woman moving behind the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face flushed from the heat of the kitchen. Yvain had ruled the vampire clans of the Eastern Territories for over 5 centuries. He had commanded armies, negotiated treaties written in blood, and crushed rebellions with nothing more than a glance. He did not lower himself to enter failing human restaurants in forgotten neighborhoods. But the smell. That damned smell. It reminded him of something he'd lost so long ago that the memory felt like touching a wound that had never properly healed. Before he'd been turned, before immortality had stripped away his ability to enjoy mortal pleasures, he'd been human. He'd eaten bread and drunk wine and tasted the simple joy of a warm meal after a cold day. 3 centuries ago, he'd made the mistake of trying. Some foolish hope had driven him to sit at a table in Paris and order coq au vin. The food had turned to ash in his mouth, tasteless and vile, and he'd nearly killed the waiter in his rage and disappointment. Since then, he'd accepted what he was. Vampires didn't eat. They drank blood. They sustained themselves on the life force of others, and they let go of human weaknesses. So why was he standing in this alley, staring at a struggling restaurant like a starving beggar? "Your Majesty?" The voice came from behind him, soft and respectful, but edged with concern. Lucian, his oldest advisor, materialized from the darkness. Like all of their kind, Lucian bore the marks of their lineage, skin pale as porcelain, hair white as fresh snow, eyes that gleamed red in the darkness. "The council is waiting. The treaty negotiations with the Western clans cannot proceed without you." "Let them wait," Yvain said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Even after 500 years, his accent still held traces of the old world, the ancient kingdoms that had crumbled to dust while he endured. Lucian's crimson eyes flickered toward the restaurant. "What draws your attention to this place?" Yvain didn't answer. He couldn't explain it, not even to himself. Instead, he stepped forward, moving with the inhuman grace that marked his kind, and pushed open the door to Beatrice's kitchen. The warmth hit him first, followed by the full force of the aromas he'd caught from outside. Garlic, herbs, something rich and savory that made his throat tighten with an emotion he'd thought long dead. The restaurant was empty except for the woman behind the counter. She looked up at the sound of the bell above the door, and Yvain found himself caught by eyes the color of autumn leaves, brown shot through with gold and green. "We're about to close," she said, but there was no harshness in her voice, just exhaustion. She looked worn, he realized. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her chef's whites bore the stains of a long day. "But I can make you something quick if you're hungry." Hungry. The word struck him like a physical blow. When had he last felt hunger for anything other than blood? "What would you recommend?" he asked, surprising himself. Lucian, who had followed him inside, made a small sound of shock that Yvain ignored. The woman Beatrice, he assumed from the sign, studied him for a moment. He wondered what she saw. Did she sense the predator beneath his carefully maintained human facade? Could she feel the ancient power that radiated from him like heat from a furnace? "You look like you need comfort food," she said finally. "I've got a beef stew that's been simmering all day, served with fresh bread and butter. It's simple, but it's good." "Then I'll have that." She blinked, as if surprised that he'd agreed so easily. "Take a seat, I'll bring it out." Yvain moved to a table by the window, hyper-aware of how exposed he was. The glass would turn to deadly sunlight in a few hours, but for now, the night protected him. Lucian stood by the door, a silent sentinel, his disapproval radiating like cold fog. "Your Majesty, this is madness," Lucian whispered, leaning close. "You cannot eat human food. The last time you tried—" "I remember," Yvain cut him off. "I remember perfectly. Every moment of every day of my existence, I remember. That's the curse of immortality, Lucian. Perfect memory and nothing new to remember." Lucian fell silent, but his concern lingered in the air between them. The woman emerged from the kitchen carrying a steaming bowl. The scent hit Yvain with almost violent force, and he had to grip the edge of the table to keep from reacting. She set the bowl in front of him along with a basket of bread that was still warm from the oven and a small dish of butter that had been whipped until it was light as clouds. "Be careful, it's hot," she said, then paused. "Are you all right? You look really pale." Of course he did. He was dead, had been dead for 5 centuries, but he found himself saying, "I'm fine, just tired." She nodded, accepting the lie, and turned to go back to the kitchen, but something made her pause and look back. "I'm Beatrice, by the way, Beatrice Rosewood. This is my place." "Yvain," he said, leaving off his surname and title. "Thank you for staying open." "Don't thank me yet. Try the stew first." She offered a small, tired smile and disappeared back into the kitchen. Yvain stared down at the bowl in front of him. Steam rose from the rich, dark broth, carrying with it scents that awoke memories he'd tried to bury. His mother's kitchen in the castle where he'd been born, the feast hall where he'd celebrated his 18th birthday just weeks before a vampire attack had changed his life forever. The simple joy of breaking fast with his younger sister, gone now for 4.5 centuries. He picked up the spoon. His hand, which had held swords and signed death warrants without trembling, shook slightly. "Your Majesty, please," Lucian said softly. "You know what will happen." Yvain ignored him. He lifted the spoon to his lips and tasted. For a moment, nothing happened. The liquid touched his tongue, and he felt the heat of it, the texture. Then, gods and demons and every power that had ever existed, he tasted it. Rich beef, tender and falling apart, carrots sweetened by long cooking, potatoes that dissolved into the broth, herbs and spices that layered over each other in perfect harmony. It was simple food, peasant food, the kind of meal that had sustained humanity since the dawn of time, and it was the most beautiful thing Yvain had experienced in 300 years. He took another spoonful, then another. His hand stopped shaking as he ate, each bite a revelation. The bread was crusty on the outside, soft within, and when he spread the whipped butter over it, the combination was transcendent. He was halfway through the bowl when he realized his vision had blurred. He blinked, confused, and felt moisture on his cheeks. He was weeping. The vampire king, ruler of the eastern territories, a creature who had killed thousands and commanded the fear and respect of an entire supernatural nation, was sitting in a failing restaurant crying over a bowl of beef stew. "Your Majesty!" Lucian's voice was tight with alarm. "We should leave, now!" But Yvain couldn't move. He sat frozen, tears streaming down his pale face, the spoon still clutched in his hand. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Perhaps on the night he'd been turned, when he'd realized what he had lost. Perhaps when he had outlived everyone he had ever loved in his mortal life. The memories were too distant, buried under centuries of carefully constructed control. "What's wrong?" Beatrice's voice broke through his paralysis. She'd emerged from the kitchen and was staring at him with concern and confusion. "Is it that bad?" He shook his head, unable to speak. How could he explain? How could he tell her that her simple cooking had cracked open something in him that he'd thought was sealed forever? She came closer, her movements cautious, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Hey, it's okay. Whatever it is, it's okay." "It's perfect," he managed, his voice rough. "It's absolutely perfect." Beatrice's expression shifted from concern to confusion to something softer. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, studying his face with those autumn-colored eyes. "When was the last time you had a home-cooked meal?" 300 years, he said without thinking, then watched her eyes widen. That's a really long time to go without good food," she said carefully, as if speaking to someone who might be slightly unhinged. "Are you being metaphorical, or—" Yvain looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the exhaustion and the stained chef's whites to something deeper. There was kindness in her face, a gentleness that had somehow survived whatever hardships had led her to running a failing restaurant alone. Something in him, some long dormant instinct, stirred in response. "My condition makes eating difficult," he said, choosing his words carefully. "I haven't been able to taste food in a very long time. But yours I can taste." It wasn't quite a lie. Vampires were gifted at half-truths, at shading reality without breaking it completely. Beatrice's expression softened further. "You have a medical condition? I'm so sorry. That must be awful." She glanced at the bowl. "Well, if my cooking helps, you're welcome here any time. God knows I could use the customers." There was a weight to those last words, a burden that Yvain, despite his supernatural senses, didn't need special powers to detect. "You're struggling." "That obvious, huh?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, I'm about 3 months from losing this place. Turns out passion and decent cooking aren't enough when you're competing with chains and delivery apps." She stood up abruptly, as if embarrassed by the admission. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems. Eat your stew before it gets cold." She moved back toward the kitchen, but Yvain reached out without thinking and caught her wrist. Her skin was warm beneath his fingers, alive with the pulse of blood just beneath the surface. He released her immediately, shocked by his own action. "I'd like to come back," he said, "if that's acceptable." Beatrice rubbed her wrist absently, and he saw the goosebumps that had risen on her skin where he'd touched her. She must have felt the unnatural coldness of him. "Of course, like I said, I could use the business. We're open from 11 to 9 most days." "I'll come at night," Yvain said. "Late, if possible. My schedule is complicated." "Night shift, huh? Yeah, I get that. I'll make sure to keep the kitchen open for you." She smiled at him then, a genuine smile despite the weariness in her eyes, and Yvain felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous and unprecedented. "Come on, Your Majesty," Lucian said from the door, his patience clearly exhausted. "The council has been waiting for hours." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Your Majesty? Is that like a nickname or—" "Something like that," Yvain said smoothly. He stood, pulling out a wallet and extracting several bills. He placed them on the table, far more than the meal had cost. "For the stew and the company." Before she could protest, he was at the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back at her. She stood by the table, holding the money he'd left, her expression caught between gratitude and confusion. "Thank you, Beatrice Rosewood," he said softly. "You've given me a gift beyond measure." Then he was gone, moving with supernatural speed into the night, leaving her alone in the restaurant with questions she couldn't yet answer. Lucian didn't speak until they were several blocks away, standing on a rooftop overlooking the city. Below them, the mortal world carried on in ignorance of the supernatural powers that moved through its shadows. "What happened in there?" Lucian finally asked. "I've served you for 2 centuries, and I've never seen you lose control like that." Yvain stared out at the city lights, his mind still reeling from what he'd experienced. "I could taste it, Lucian. Not just the food, I could taste life itself, warmth and care and everything I've been denied for centuries. That's impossible. Vampires cannot eat mortal food. The transformation makes it taste like ash and corruption. I know what we can and cannot do. I wrote half the laws that govern our kind." Yvain turned to face his advisor. "And yet I'm telling you, I tasted every ingredient in that stew. I tasted the hours she spent preparing it, the care she put into every element. It was real." Lucian's crimson eyes narrowed. "Then she's not what she appears. She must be a witch, or perhaps a vampire herself in hiding, some kind of supernatural entity with the power to—" "She's human," Yvain interrupted. "Completely, utterly human. I would have sensed anything else." He paused, considering. "But there is something about her, something that calls to me." "Your Majesty, this is dangerous. If the other clans learn that you've developed an interest in a mortal, then they'll learn that their king does as he pleases," Yvain said coldly. "Now, let's attend to this council meeting. The Western clans can have their treaty, but on my terms." As they moved through the night toward the hidden entrances to the vampire realm beneath the city, Yvain's thoughts remained fixed on the small restaurant and the woman who'd somehow given him back something he'd thought lost forever. He would return. He had to. Not just for the food, but for reasons he was only beginning to understand. The vampire realm existed in a space between worlds, accessible through carefully guarded portals scattered throughout the city. The one Yvain used tonight was hidden in the basement of an abandoned church, behind a door that had been locked for decades by mortal standards, but opened easily to his touch. Beyond lay the true heart of his kingdom, a vast underground complex of halls and chambers that stretched for miles beneath the mortal city above. Here, vampires had built their own civilization, a mirror of the world they'd left behind, but shaped by centuries of immortal ambition and ancient power. The Grand Hall was exactly what its name suggested, a massive chamber carved from living stone and decorated with the spoils of 1,000 conquered kingdoms. Tapestries from empires that no longer existed hung on the walls. Art that the mortal world thought lost to time adorned the spaces between ancient columns. At the far end, raised on a dais of black marble, stood the throne that Yvain had claimed 5 centuries ago when he'd united the feuding vampire clans under a single banner. The council was waiting. 7 vampires, each representing one of the major bloodlines that composed his kingdom, stood in a semicircle before the throne. They were all ancient, all powerful, and all currently radiating varying degrees of irritation at being kept waiting. Yvain took his seat on the throne, arranging himself with the casual arrogance of absolute power. Lucien moved to stand at his right hand, taking up his customary position. "Forgive my tardiness," Yvain said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. "I was detained by matters requiring my personal attention." Severin Voss, representative of the warrior bloodline and the most outspoken of the council, stepped forward. His white hair was bound in a severe style that emphasized the sharp angles of his pale face. "Your Majesty, the Western clans grow impatient. They threaten to withdraw from negotiations entirely if we don't present our terms within the week." "Let them," Yvain said dismissively. "The Western clans need this treaty far more than we do. Their territories are being encroached upon by hunters, and their king is too weak to mount an effective defense. They'll come crawling back." "And if they don't?" This from Meridiana, the eldest of the council and representative of the sorcerer bloodline. Her crimson eyes held the weight of centuries. "If they ally with the southern clans instead?" "Then we'll crush them both," Yvain said simply. "I've done it before. I'll do it again if necessary." Silence greeted this pronouncement. It wasn't an idle boast. Yvain's military campaigns were legendary among their kind. He'd built his kingdom on the ashes of those who'd opposed him, and everyone in this chamber knew he had the will and power to do so again. "However," Yvain continued, his tone shifting slightly, "I have no desire for war at present. We'll offer the Western clans a treaty, but one that heavily favors our interests. They can accept it or face the consequences." For the next 2 hours, they discussed terms, borders, and blood rights, hunting territories and feeding grounds, all the intricate details that governed vampire society. Yvain participated with half his attention, offering decisions when required, but finding his mind wandering back to a small restaurant and a tired woman with kind eyes. It was Lucien who finally dismissed the council, citing the lateness of the hour and the king's need for rest. As the council members filed out, Meridiana lingered behind. "Something troubles you, my king," she said when they were alone. It wasn't a question. Yvain studied her. Meridiana was over 800 years old, older even than him, and she'd served as his advisor since the early days of his reign. She knew him better than almost anyone. "I tasted food tonight," he said finally. "Real food, not the ash that normally passes for mortal cooking." "I tasted it, Meridiana, and it was beautiful." The ancient vampire's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "That shouldn't be possible." "And yet it was." He leaned forward, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "What does it mean?" Meridiana was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "There are legends, old stories from before even my time. They speak of true mates mortals and vampires whose souls are bound together across the barrier of death and immortality. The stories say that when a vampire finds their true mate, aspects of their lost humanity begin to return. Food regains its taste, colors become brighter, emotions that have been dulled by centuries suddenly burn as brightly as they did in mortal life. Yvain's jaw tightened. I don't believe in fairy tales. Neither did I until tonight. But you're telling me that you, who haven't been able to eat for 3 centuries, suddenly could taste a mortal meal. There must be an explanation. The explanation is that she's an excellent cook, Yvain said, but even to his own ears the words rang hollow. Meridiana moved closer to the throne, her ancient face thoughtful. Be careful, my king. If she truly is your mate, then she's both a blessing and a terrible vulnerability. Our enemies would use her against you without hesitation. I can protect what's mine. Can you? She's mortal, fragile. She'll age and die in the blink of an eye while you remain unchanged. And if you turn her, I won't. The words came out harder than he'd intended. I won't turn her. Meridiana raised an eyebrow. Then what will you do? Court her for her brief mortal life and then watch her die? That seems unlike you, Your Majesty. You've never been one to accept loss gracefully. Yvain rose from the throne, his movements sharp with agitation. I don't know what I'll do. I don't even know if I'll see her again. It was a lie, and they both knew it. He would see Beatrice Rosewood again. The compulsion to return to her, to experience again what he'd felt tonight, was already singing in his blood like a drug. Just be careful, Meridiana said softly. Love is dangerous for immortals. It makes us reckless, and a reckless king is a vulnerable king. After she left, Yvain stood alone in the grand hall, surrounded by the trappings of his power, and felt more uncertain than he had in centuries. 3 nights later, Yvain returned to Beatrice's kitchen. He'd spent the intervening time trying to convince himself that the experience had been a fluke, a momentary aberration caused by stress or some unknown factor. But the memory of that meal haunted him. More than that, the memory of her haunted him, her kindness, her gentle concern, the warmth in her eyes. This time he came alone, having forbidden Lucien from following. The restaurant was empty again, and Beatrice was in the kitchen when he entered. She looked up at the sound of the bell and smiled, a genuine expression of pleasure that made something in his chest tighten. You came back, she said. I wasn't sure you would. I said I would, Yvain replied, moving to the same table by the window. Yeah, but people say a lot of things. She emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. What can I get you tonight? What would you recommend? She considered for a moment, her head tilting in a way that made her ponytail swing. I made chicken soup today. Real chicken soup, not the canned stuff. I roasted the bones myself for the stock. It's got vegetables and noodles and enough garlic to ward off. She stopped abruptly, her cheeks flushing. Sorry, I was going to say vampires. Bad joke. Yvain felt his lips twitch in what might have been a smile. If she only knew. I'll try the soup. As she disappeared back into the kitchen, he found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did. There was something about this place, this small bubble of warmth and humanity, that quieted the constant vigilance that had ruled him for centuries. Beatrice returned with the soup, and once again the scent hit him like a physical force. He waited until she'd set it down before lifting the spoon. The first taste was just as miraculous as the stew had been. Maybe more so. The broth was golden and clear, rich with the flavor of roasted bones and long simmering. The vegetables were tender, the noodles perfectly cooked. And yes, there was garlic enough to ward off vampires, as she'd said. Under normal circumstances, it would have been mildly unpleasant to him, a reminder of his supernatural nature. But in this soup, prepared by her hands, it was delicious. He ate slowly this time, savoring each spoonful, determined not to lose control as he had before. But the emotions still welled up gratitude and wonder, and something deeper that he didn't want to name. Can I ask you something? Beatrice said, pulling out the chair across from him again. She'd done that last time too, he realized. Sat with him like they were friends rather than stranger and customer. Of course. Why do you come so late? It's almost 10. Most places would be closed by now. Yvain chose his words carefully. I work nights, unusual hours. It makes maintaining normal schedules difficult. What do you do? I'm in management, he said, which was technically true. He managed an entire kingdom. I oversee various territories and handle disputes. It's demanding work. She nodded, accepting this. I get that. I used to work for a restaurant group before I opened this place, corporate management and all the politics and pressure. That's partly why I wanted my own place. Thought it would be better, more fulfilling. She laughed quietly. Turns out I just traded one set of problems for another. Why is the restaurant failing? Yvain asked. The question was more direct than perhaps was polite, but he found himself genuinely curious. Beatrice sighed, playing with the edge of her apron. Lots of reasons. Location's not great. I don't have money for advertising. And honestly, I think I'm just not business-minded enough. I focused on making good food, but I didn't think about things like profit margins and customer acquisition and all the boring stuff that actually keeps a place running. She looked around the empty restaurant, and he could see the sadness in her expression. I put everything I had into this place, all my savings, all my time, all my hope, and it's not enough. What will you do if it closes? I don't know. Her voice was small. Start over somewhere, I guess. Try to find another job cooking for someone else. But it won't be the same. This place was my dream, you know, and I'm watching it die slowly, one unpaid bill at a time. Yvain set down his spoon, his mind already working through possibilities. He had resources beyond measure, wealth accumulated over centuries of careful investment and conquest. Saving a restaurant would be trivial for him, but he couldn't simply throw money at her. She'd ask questions, and he had no good answers that wouldn't reveal what he was. Don't give up yet, he said finally. Sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. She smiled at him, a sad but grateful expression. You're sweet, and weird, but in a nice way. I appreciate the optimism, even if I don't share it. They talked for another hour, and Yvain found himself fascinated by the mundane details of her life. She told him about her childhood in the Midwest, her decision to go to culinary school, her struggles to make it in a competitive industry. She spoke about food with a passion that reminded him of how he'd once felt about poetry and philosophy, back when he'd been human and the world had still held infinite possibilities. In turn, he told her carefully edited versions of his own past stories from his mortal life, dusted off and adapted to sound like family history rather than personal memory. He told her about growing up in a castle, about learning to fight and read and negotiate, about the weight of responsibility that came with leadership. Your family sounds intense, she said when he finished describing his father's court. All that political intrigue and power struggles. It was a different time, Yvain said. People lived by different rules. Do you miss it? That life? The question caught him off guard. Did he miss being human? He'd spent centuries telling himself he didn't, that mortality was weakness and his transformation had been a gift rather than a curse. But sitting here, eating soup and talking to a woman whose greatest concern was saving her failing restaurant, he felt the loss of his humanity more keenly than he had in ages. Sometimes, he admitted, I miss the simplicity of it, the way everything felt immediate and important because time was limited. Beatrice nodded slowly. I get that. When you have forever, nothing matters as much, right? Exactly. She glanced at the clock on the wall and winced. It's almost midnight. I should close up. Not that I'm kicking you out. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. You're literally the only customer I've had all night. Yvain stood, pulling out his wallet again. This time he left enough to cover a week's worth of meals. That's too much, Beatrice protested, staring at the bills. Consider it a deposit on future meals. I intend to come back regularly. He moved toward the door, then paused. Same time tomorrow? She clutched the money, her eyes bright. Yes, I'll be here. I'll make something special. As he left the restaurant and stepped back into the night, Yvain felt the weight of eyes on him. He turned to find Lucien waiting in the shadows, along with 2 other members of his personal guard. I told you not to follow me, Yvain said coldly. With respect, Your Majesty, your safety is not negotiable. Lucien stepped forward, his expression grim. The council is growing concerned. You've been absent from court duties, meetings are being delayed, and rumors are spreading about your nightly disappearances. Let them spread. I'll address the council when I'm ready. And the mortal woman? Will you address her as well, or will you keep lying to her about what you are? Yvain moved faster than human eyes could track, slamming Lucien against the alley wall with enough force to crack the brick. Be very careful about how you speak to me, old friend. My patience has limits. Lucien didn't struggle. but his crimson eyes blazed with emotion. She deserves to know the truth. You're courting her under false pretenses, letting her believe you're something you're not. How long can you maintain the deception? What happens when she discovers that the man she's sharing meals with is a creature who drinks blood to survive? That you're using her for— I'm not using her, Yvain snarled, releasing him. He stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. What was he doing? What was Beatrice becoming to him? You're falling in love with her, Lucian said quietly. And she with you, unless I'm very much mistaken. I saw the way she looked at you through the window. Like you hung the moon. He straightened his clothes, his expression softening. I'm not trying to be cruel, Yvain. I'm trying to protect you, both of you. This path leads to pain. All paths lead to pain eventually, Yvain said. I've lived long enough to know that. But for the first time in 3 centuries, I feel something other than emptiness. Can you understand that? For the first time since I died, I feel alive. Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Finally he nodded. Then I'll support you, as I always have. But please, Your Majesty, be honest with her. Tell her what you are before it's too late. Give her the choice. Yvain wanted to argue, but he knew Lucien was right. Beatrice deserved the truth. The question was whether he had the courage to risk losing her by revealing it. Over the following weeks, Yvain became a regular fixture at Beatrice's kitchen. He came every night, always late, always when the restaurant was empty, or nearly so. And every night, Beatrice made him something different. She prepared dishes from around the world, Italian pasta with sauce that had simmered for hours, French cassoulet rich with duck and beans, Thai curry that made his long-dead taste buds sing with pleasure. She made comfort food and haute cuisine, simple sandwiches, and elaborate multi-course meals. And everything, every single thing was perfect. But more than the food, he found himself addicted to her company. She was funny and self-deprecating, passionate about her craft, but refreshingly humble about her abilities. She asked him questions about his life, and he answered with as much truth as he dared, walking the razor's edge between honesty and revelation. He learned that she'd lost her parents in a car accident when she was 19, that she had no siblings, that her dream of opening a restaurant had been partly inspired by memories of cooking with her mother. He learned that she loved old movies and bad pop music, that she was terrible at sports but excellent at trivia, that she believed in being kind even when the world gave you every reason not to be. And with each visit, each conversation, each shared meal, he felt the walls he'd built around his heart crumbling. It was Beatrice who finally acknowledged what was growing between them. It happened on a night when she'd made lasagna, layers of pasta and cheese and meat sauce that had been crafted with obvious care. He'd eaten every bite, as he always did, and they'd fallen into their usual pattern of talking as she cleaned up the kitchen. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said, pausing in the middle of wiping down the counter. Yvain tensed. "Of course. Why me? I mean, you clearly have money." She gestured at his clothes, which were expensive even if he deliberately dressed down for these visits. "You could eat anywhere. Michelin-starred restaurants, private chefs, whatever you want. So why do you keep coming back to my failing restaurant in a bad neighborhood?" He could have deflected, should have deflected. Instead, he found himself saying, "Because when I'm here, I feel human again." Beatrice set down her cleaning cloth and moved closer. In the warm light of the kitchen, with her hair escaping from its ponytail and flour still dusting her cheek, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the supernatural perfection of his own kind. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. This was it, the moment where he should tell her everything, about what he was, what he'd been, the centuries of death and darkness that separated them. But when he opened his mouth, different words came out. "I mean that you make me feel things I haven't felt in a very long time. Hope, joy, connection." He stood, moving closer to her. "Beatrice, these past weeks have been—" "I know," she interrupted. "For me too. I look forward to you coming in. Not just because of the money, though God knows I need it, but because I like talking to you. I like learning about you. I like—" She stopped, biting her lip. "This is crazy. We barely know each other." "I feel like I've known you forever," Yvain said. And it wasn't a lie. Some part of him, some deep and fundamental part, recognized her as if they'd been searching for each other across lifetimes. She reached up and touched his face, her warm fingers tracing his cheekbone. "You're so cold," she murmured. "Are you sick? You're always so pale and cold." "It's a medical condition," he said, falling back on the excuse he'd used before. "Poor circulation. I know I feel—" She kissed him. It was tentative and gentle, her lips soft against his, and it shattered him completely. He'd been kissed before, thousands of times over his long existence, but this was different. This was Beatrice. This was real, and the touch of her mouth against his sent electricity racing through his dead nerves. He kissed her back, carefully, terrified of letting his control slip. His fangs were retracted, but they could extend in moments if he wasn't careful. His strength could crush her if he forgot himself. So he forced himself to be gentle, to meet her tenderness with his own, to pour into the kiss all the longing and need and desperate hope that he couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, her face was flushed and her eyes were bright. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," she admitted. "As have I." He rested his forehead against hers, breathing in her scent, vanilla and spices, and something uniquely her. "Beatrice, there are things about me you don't know, things I should tell you before this goes any further." "Like what? You're secretly married? A criminal? In witness protection?" She was joking, trying to lighten the mood, but he could see the hint of worry in her eyes. "Nothing like that. But my life is complicated, dangerous even. And if you become part of it, then I become part of it," she said firmly. "Yvain, I don't know what's happening here, but I know it's real. I know I feel more alive when I'm with you than I have in years, so whatever your complications are, we'll figure them out together." He wanted to believe her. Gods, how he wanted to believe that they could make this work despite everything that stood between them. But he knew better. He'd lived too long, seen too much, lost too many people he'd cared about. Still, he found himself nodding. "Together, then." She smiled and pulled him close for another kiss, and for that moment, Yvain allowed himself to forget about kingdoms and councils and the impossible gulf between mortal and immortal. For that moment, he was just a man kissing the woman he loved. The word echoed in his mind, stark and undeniable. Love. He was in love with Beatrice Rosewood. After 500 years of emotional numbness, after countless partners who'd been nothing more than temporary diversions, he'd found someone who made him feel. And it terrified him more than anything he'd faced in his long existence. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and secret meetings. Yvain continued his nightly visits to the restaurant, but now they ended with kisses and whispered conversations, with his hands in her hair and her heart beating against his chest like a promise. He told himself he would reveal the truth soon. He would find the right moment, the right words, and he would trust that what they had was strong enough to survive the revelation. But days turned into weeks, and he kept finding reasons to delay. Meanwhile, his absence from vampire politics was becoming increasingly problematic. The council grew more insistent, demanding his presence at meetings he kept postponing. Tensions with the Western clans were escalating. Rumors of hunter activity in the city were increasing. His kingdom needed him, but all he wanted was to be with Beatrice. It was Meridiana who finally forced his hand. She appeared at the restaurant one night just as Beatrice was closing, materializing from the shadows with the casual disregard for mortal awareness that marked the truly ancient vampires. Yvain, who'd been helping Beatrice clean up, felt her presence immediately. He moved between her and Beatrice instinctively, his body language shifting from relaxed to predatory in an instant. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Saving you from yourself, apparently." Meridiana's crimson eyes fixed on Beatrice, who'd frozen behind the counter, her expression caught between fear and confusion. "So this is the mortal who's captured the king's heart. I must admit, I don't see the appeal." "Yvain?" Beatrice's voice was small. "What's going on? Who is this?" "No one," Yvain said harshly. "Meridiana, leave, now." But the ancient vampire ignored him, moving closer to Beatrice with the gliding walk of their kind. "Has he told you what he is, little mortal? Has your lover explained why he only visits at night, why his skin is cold, why he can eat your food when no other vampire in existence can?" "Stop," Yvain snarled, but it was too late. He could see the understanding dawning in Beatrice's eyes, see the pieces clicking together in her mind. "Vampire," she whispered, that's not real. Vampires aren't real." "Oh, child, we're very real." Meridiana smiled, and this time her fangs were visible, long and wickedly sharp. "We've been real since before your species learned to make fire, and the man you've been kissing, the man you've been falling in love with, he's the king of us all, the ruler of the Eastern Territories, a creature who's killed more humans than you could count, who drinks blood to survive, who'll watch you age and die while he remains eternally unchanged." Beatrice's eyes went to Yvain, wide and terrified and pleading. "Tell me she's lying. Please tell me this is some kind of sick joke." Yvain wanted to lie. Every instinct screamed at him to deny everything, to smooth this over with honeyed words and careful manipulation. But he'd lied to her enough. If he had any hope of salvaging this, he needed to give her the truth. "She's not lying," he said quietly. "I'm a vampire, Beatrice. I have been for 500 years. And yes, I'm a king. Everything else she said is also true." The color drained from Beatrice's face. "You've been lying to me this whole time. Everything you said, everything we did, it was all lies." "No." He moved toward her, but she backed away, and the rejection cut deeper than any blade. "The lies were only about what I am, not about how I feel. Everything I said about you, about us, that was real. How can I believe that? How can I believe anything you say?" Tears were streaming down her face now. "You're a monster. You kill people. You drink blood. Oh God, were you planning to kill me? Was this whole thing just you playing with your food?" "Never," Yvain said fiercely. "I would never harm you. You're—" He struggled for words. "You're everything to me. You gave me back my humanity. When I'm with you, I can taste food. I can feel warmth. I can be more than just a monster. You're my salvation." "I don't want to be your salvation," Beatrice was crying openly now. "I don't want to be the thing that makes a vampire feel human. I wanted something real, someone real, not this." Meridiana, who'd been watching the exchange with clinical interest, spoke again. "She's right to reject you, Your Majesty. This was doomed from the start. Let her go. Find a proper consort among our kind and stop this foolishness." "Get out," Yvain said without looking at her. "Get out before I forget that you're my advisor and treat you as the threat you're being." For a moment, he thought Meridiana might argue. Then she inclined her head slightly and vanished back into the shadows, leaving him alone with Beatrice and the ruins of everything they'd built. "I should have told you sooner," he said into the heavy silence. "I know that. I was a coward, but please believe me when I say that my feelings for you are genuine. I love you, Beatrice. For the first time in 500 years, I love someone." "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say that. Love is supposed to be honest. Love is supposed to be safe. What you're offering is neither." "I can keep you safe. I'm the most powerful vampire in this territory. No one would dare touch you with my protection." "And who protects me from you?" She wrapped her arms around herself, looking suddenly small and vulnerable. "You said you drink blood. Do you kill the people you feed from?" Yvain hesitated. He could lie, but she'd know. "Sometimes. When necessary. But I could survive on donated blood if—" "Get out." Her voice was flat, empty. "Get out of my restaurant and don't come back." "Beatrice, please." "Get out!" The anguish in her voice broke something in him. He'd faced armies and survived assassination attempts and negotiated with monsters worse than himself, but he couldn't withstand the pain in her eyes. So he did as she asked. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the only person who'd made him feel alive in 3 centuries. He made it 3 blocks before the rage took over. He slammed his fist into a brick wall, and the entire structure crumbled. He wanted to destroy something, to hurt someone, to channel the agony tearing through him into violence. But what would that accomplish? It wouldn't change what he was. It wouldn't bring Beatrice back. Lucian found him standing in the ruins of the wall, staring at his bloodied hands. "I heard what happened," the advisor said quietly. "I'm sorry. She hates me. She thinks I'm a monster." "You are a monster," Lucian said, but not unkindly. "We all are. That's the price of immortality. But you're also more than that. You're a king who's maintained peace for centuries, a leader who's protected your people against countless threats, and yes, you're a man or the memory of a man who fell in love. Yvain looked at him, and for once, he let Lucian see his vulnerability. What do I do? You give her time. You let her process this. And then, if she'll allow it, you fight for her. Lucian put a hand on his shoulder. But first, you need to deal with the situation back home. The Western clans aren't waiting anymore. They've allied with the Southern clans and are moving against our borders. If you don't address this now, there will be war. War. The word rang hollow in Yvain's mind. What did he care about territories and treaties when the only thing that mattered had just slipped through his fingers? But he was still a king. He still had responsibilities. So he nodded and followed Lucian back into the darkness, back to the vampire realm where duty waited like a patient beast. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare of politics and violence. The Western and Southern clans had indeed formed an alliance. Emboldened by rumors of Yvain's distraction, they launched coordinated attacks on 3 of his border territories, killing his people and claiming the feeding grounds for themselves. Yvain responded with the cold efficiency that had made him feared throughout the vampire world. He led his forces personally, crushing the uprising with ruthless precision. The battles were brutal vampires ripping each other apart in darkness, blood painting the walls of the underground territories, screams echoing through stone passages. He should have felt something: satisfaction at victory, anger at the betrayal, pride in his warrior's performance. But all he felt was numbness. Every moment, his thoughts returned to Beatrice, wondering if she was safe, wondering if she thought of him, wondering if he'd destroyed the best thing in his eternal existence. When the rebellion was finally crushed and the allied clans sued for peace on unfavorable terms, Yvain stood before his assembled court and felt nothing. This was his life. This was what he was, a king of monsters playing games of power and blood while the mortal world carried on above him in ignorant peace. "Your Majesty, you've won a great victory," Severin said, bowing low. "The other clans will think twice before challenging you again." "Yes," Yvain said mechanically. "Arrange the treaty signing. Make sure the terms heavily favor our interests. I want their territories reduced by 1/3 and their feeding rights curtailed." As his council scattered to carry out his orders, Meridiana approached. She'd been absent from the battles, claiming her place was advising rather than fighting. But Yvain suspected she'd been deliberately avoiding him after what she'd done. "Are you going to punish me?" she asked without preamble. "For what? Telling her the truth?" "No. You did what I should have done weeks ago." He looked at her. "But if you ever approach her again without my explicit permission, I will consider it an act of treason." Meridiana inclined her head. "Understood. For what it's worth, I am sorry. I thought I was protecting you from a mistake. I see now that I was wrong." "Why the change of heart?" "Because I watched you fight these past weeks. I've seen you in battle before. You're magnificent, unstoppable, a force of nature. But this time you fought like you had nothing to lose, like you didn't care if you survived or not." Her ancient eyes were sad. "That mortal woman didn't weaken you. She gave you something to fight for beyond duty, and I took that away." "She took it away when she rejected me," Yvain corrected, "as she had every right to do." "Have you tried to contact her?" "No, she asked me to stay away." "And since when do you follow orders from anyone?" Meridiana asked pointedly. "You're a king. You don't give up what's yours without a fight." "She's not mine. She's her own person with her own choices. Then respect those choices by giving her the chance to make an informed one. Court her properly. Show her that what you are doesn't negate what you feel. Prove to her that a monster can love." Yvain wanted to dismiss the advice. The rational part of him knew that pursuing Beatrice would only cause her more pain, would only drag her deeper into a world where she didn't belong. But the part of him that had wept over a bowl of stew, that had felt joy for the first time in centuries, refused to let go. "I don't know how," he admitted. "I don't know how to bridge the gap between what I am and what she needs." "Then figure it out," Meridiana said simply. "Because if you don't, you'll spend the next 500 years regretting it." Yvain made his decision that night. He would go to Beatrice one more time. He would apologize for the lies, explain everything about himself and his world, and then give her a real choice to accept him as he was, or to walk away knowing the full truth. And if she chose to walk away, he would let her. He would use his power to ensure she was protected and financially secure, and then he would step back into the shadows and let her live her mortal life in peace. But he had to try. He owed both of them that much. He found her restaurant dark and locked when he arrived. A sign on the door read, "Closed until further notice." Panic seized him. Had something happened to her? Had his enemies discovered her importance to him and moved against her? He was about to break down the door when he noticed a light in the apartment above the restaurant. Relief flooded through him, followed by determination. He moved to the side of the building where a fire escape led up to the second floor. In seconds, he was outside her window. She was inside, sitting at a small table with papers spread out in front of her. Even from outside, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand moved mechanically across the pages. Bills, he realized. She was going through bills she couldn't pay. He tapped gently on the window. Beatrice's head snapped up, and for a moment, fear flashed across her face. Then she recognized him, and the fear transformed into something more complex. Anger, pain, and underneath it all, something that might have been longing. She stood and moved to the window, but she didn't open it. They stared at each other through the glass, and Yvain felt the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. Finally, she unlocked the window and pushed it open a few inches. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was guarded. "I needed to see you, to know you were safe." "I'm fine. You can go now." "Beatrice, please, can we talk? Really talk? I want to explain everything." "What's there to explain? You're a vampire. You drink blood. You lied to me." She crossed her arms. "That about covers it. It doesn't cover how I feel about you. It doesn't cover the fact that you changed my existence in ways I can't begin to explain. I don't want to change you. I don't want to be responsible for making a monster feel human." She was echoing her words from before, but this time there was less conviction in her voice. "Just leave me alone, Yvain." "I will. If that's truly what you want, I'll walk away and never bother you again. But first, please let me say what I came to say, and then the choice is yours." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed and stepped back from the window. "Fine. Come in. But this doesn't mean I've forgiven you." He climbed through the window with supernatural grace, finding himself in a small but tidy apartment. It was clearly a space carved out above the restaurant kitchen in one corner, living area with a threadbare couch, a door that presumably led to a bedroom. It spoke of careful budgeting and practical choices, of someone making the most of limited resources. Beatrice gestured to the couch, and he sat. She remained standing, maintaining distance between them. "Talk," she said. So he did. He told her everything about his mortal life 5 centuries ago, about the vampire attack that had changed him, about the centuries of existence that had followed. He explained vampire society, the clans and territories, the laws that governed their kind. He described what it meant to be a vampire, the strengths and weaknesses, the feeding and killing, the eternal separation from humanity. He told her about the war he'd just fought, about the responsibilities he carried as king. And he told her about the 300 years during which food had tasted like ash, until the night he'd wandered into a restaurant and found himself able to taste again. "According to ancient legends, it means you're my mate," he said, watching her face carefully. "My true mate, the one person in all the world who can return aspects of my humanity." Beatrice's expression was unreadable. "And what does that mean exactly? That we're fated to be together? That I don't get a choice?" "No. You always have a choice. The bond means we're compatible in ways that transcend normal relationships. It means what we could have together would be deeper, stronger, more meaningful than anything either of us could find elsewhere. But it doesn't force you to accept me." She was quiet for a long time, processing everything he'd said. Finally, she spoke. "Do you kill people? When you feed?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "Not often anymore. I have access to donated blood, and I can feed without killing if I'm careful. But in the past, yes, I've killed many people. I won't lie to you about that." "And if we were together, would you expect me to be okay with that? With you drinking blood, potentially killing people?" "I would swear never to kill again if that's what you needed." Yvain said. I would bind myself to synthetic blood or donated supplies if it meant being with you. You'd have my word, and I don't give that lightly. How can I trust your word when you've already lied to me? The question hit like a blade. You can't, not immediately. But I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to rebuild that trust starting now. No more lies, no more deceptions, just truth, however difficult. Beatrice moved to the window, staring out at the night. This is insane. I'm having a conversation about dating a vampire. This doesn't happen in real life. And yet here we are. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what the really crazy part is? I missed you. These past 2 weeks, even though I was angry and hurt and terrified, I missed you. I kept hoping you'd walk through the door so I could yell at you properly, or kiss you. I wasn't sure which. Hope flared in Yvain's chest. Beatrice? But that doesn't change the fundamental problem, she continued. I'm mortal. You're not. I'll age and die while you stay the same, even if we worked past everything else. How do we deal with that? I don't know, he said honestly. I've thought about it constantly. The math is brutal. You have perhaps 60 years left if you're fortunate, while I have eternity. But I would rather have 60 years with you than an eternity without you. What about turning me? Making me a vampire too? I won't do that. I won't curse you with this existence. Being a vampire means giving up sunlight, giving up mortal food, giving up the ability to have children or grow old with grandchildren around you. It means becoming a predator. I won't take those choices away from you. But you'd let me die instead. Her voice cracked. You'd fall in love with me and then watch me die? If that's what it takes to respect your humanity, yes. He stood and moved toward her, stopping just short of touching distance. I know it's selfish. I know I'm asking you to accept pain down the road for happiness now, but I can't let you go without fighting for you first. Beatrice turned to face him, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. I'm so angry at you. You lied to me. You put me in danger just by being in your life, and you're offering me a relationship with an expiration date. I should tell you to leave and never come back. But, he prompted softly. But I think I'm falling in love with you anyway, she whispered. How stupid is that? I'm falling in love with a vampire king who's going to break my heart one way or another. Yvain reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his cold hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Then we'll make it worth it. However much time we have, we'll make every moment count. I'll give you everything I am, everything I have. And when your time comes, you'll leave this world knowing you were loved more deeply than most people even dream of. That's not enough, she said, but she was leaning into his touch. I know, but it's all I can offer. She looked up at him, her autumn-colored eyes searching his face. No more lies, ever. If we do this, I need complete honesty, even when it hurts. You have my word. And you have to try to be better. If we're together, I need you to find ways to feed that don't involve killing. I need you to use your power to protect people, not just rule them. I can do that, he said. It was a promise he'd been considering anyway. His time with Beatrice had awakened his conscience in ways he hadn't expected. And I want to be involved in your world, not kept separate like a pet. If I'm going to be with the Vampire King, I want to understand what that means. That's dangerous. My world is full of enemies who would use you against me. Then protect me. You said you would, or was that a lie too? Never. I would burn the world to keep you safe. Beatrice's lips quirked in a small smile. So dramatic. You really are centuries old, aren't you? Nobody under 100 talks like that. Is that a problem? Ask me later. She rose on her toes and kissed him, and it was even better than he remembered. Her warmth, her taste, the way she fit against him like she'd been made for exactly this purpose, it was perfect. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, well, she was breathing hard. He didn't need to breathe. Beatrice pressed her forehead against his chest. I'm terrified, she admitted. Terrified this will end badly. Terrified you'll hurt me. Terrified I'll lose you to your other world. I'm terrified too, Yvain said, stroking her hair. I haven't been frightened in centuries, but you scare me to death. Or would if I wasn't already dead. She laughed, and the sound was like music. Bad vampire jokes. This relationship is doomed. Probably, but let's be doomed together. They spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, about everything. Yvain answered her questions about vampire life, the feeding, the politics, the powers and weaknesses. Beatrice told him about her fears for the restaurant, her anxiety about the future, her loneliness in the years since her parents' death. As dawn approached, Yvain reluctantly pulled himself away. "I need to go. Sunlight is lethal to my kind. Will I see you tonight? If you want me?" "I want you." She kissed him again. "But Yvain, the restaurant's still failing. Your being back in my life doesn't fix that problem." "Then we'll fix it together. I have resources. Let me help." "I don't want charity." "It's not charity. It's an investment in my mate's happiness." He grinned, and for the first time in weeks, felt genuine joy. "Besides, I need somewhere to eat. Your food is the only thing I can taste." After he left, moving through the pre-dawn darkness back to the safety of the vampire realm, Yvain felt lighter than he had in centuries. She'd given him a chance. Despite everything, despite all the reasons she should have run screaming, Beatrice had chosen him. Now, he just had to make sure he deserved that choice. The next few weeks fell into a new pattern. Yvain continued his duties as king, but he structured his time more carefully, ensuring that his nights included hours with Beatrice. He brought her to his world gradually, introducing her to the members of his court who could be trusted. Lucien was predictably supportive, treating Beatrice with the same respect he showed Yvain. Meridiana was more reserved, but apologized formally for her interference, earning a grudging acceptance from Beatrice. Not everyone was pleased. Several council members made their disapproval clear, arguing that a mortal consort weakened the king's position. Severin was the most vocal, claiming that Yvain's relationship with Beatrice distracted him from his duties. Yvain's response was to demonstrate exactly why he was king. During a council meeting where Severin openly questioned his judgment, Yvain moved with blinding speed, slamming the warrior vampire against the wall and holding him there with one hand around his throat. "Let me be absolutely clear," Yvain said, his voice deadly calm. "Beatrice Rosewood is under my protection. She is mine, and I am hers. Anyone who threatens her, insults her, or even looks at her wrong will answer to me personally. And I promise you, I am far less merciful than I was when I first claimed this throne." He released Severin, who dropped to the ground, gasping. "Does anyone else have concerns about my choice of mate?" Silence greeted the question. Even Meridiana looked impressed. "Good," Yvain continued. "Now let's discuss the trade agreements with the northern clans." After the meeting, Lucien approached him. That was perhaps more dramatic than necessary. Perhaps, but it needed to be said. I won't have her treated as less than she is. And what is she exactly? You still haven't formally declared her as your consort. Yvain considered this. In vampire society, formally declaring a mate was a serious commitment, one that came with legal protections, but also obligations. It would make Beatrice's status official, would grant her rights and authority within his kingdom. It would also paint an even larger target on her back. Not yet, he decided. Not until I'm certain she's ready for what that means. As it turned out, Beatrice was more ready than he'd anticipated. She'd been learning about vampire culture, studying the laws and customs that governed Yvain's world. She'd also been asking questions, pointed, intelligent questions that demonstrated how quickly she was grasping the complex politics of immortal society. One night, about a month after they'd reconciled, she brought up the subject directly. They were in his private quarters beneath the city, a suite of rooms that Yvain had furnished over centuries with art and treasures from around the world. Beatrice was examining a painting, a genuine Caravaggio that the mortal world thought had been lost when she spoke. "Why haven't you introduced me as your consort? I've met your council. I've toured your territory, but you always introduce me as just Beatrice, never as your mate or partner or anything official." Yvain set down the book he'd been reading. "Because making it official puts you at risk. Right now, you're under my protection, but you're not formally part of vampire politics. Once I declare you as my consort, that changes. You become a legitimate target for anyone who wants to hurt me." "I'm already a target," Beatrice pointed out. "Anyone with eyes can see how you feel about me. Keeping it unofficial doesn't protect me. It just makes my position unclear." "She's right," Meridiana said from the doorway. Neither of them had heard her approach. Ancient vampires were unsettlingly good at stealth. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but I've been hearing concerning rumors. Several of the younger vampires are questioning whether the mortal is truly under your protection or merely a temporary amusement. Some are suggesting that she could be approached without consequences." Yvain was on his feet instantly, rage flooding through him. "Who? Give me names." "It's nothing concrete yet, just whispers and speculation, but it will grow if you don't address it formally." Meridiana's expression was sympathetic. "Declare her as your consort. Make it clear that she carries your authority. It's the only way to ensure her safety." Yvain looked at Beatrice, who met his gaze steadily. "It's your choice," he said. "But Meridiana is right. Becoming my formal consort means accepting a role in vampire society. It means learning our laws, representing me at certain functions, and yes, potentially being targeted by my enemies. It's not a decision to make lightly." "Then it's good that I've been thinking about it for weeks," Beatrice said. "I want to do this, Yvain. Not just for protection, but because I want to be part of your life completely. All of it, not just the parts you think are safe for me." He moved to her, taking her hands in his. "You're certain?" "I'm terrified, but I'm certain." "Then we'll make it official. Tomorrow night, before the full council, I'll declare you as my consort and mate." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." The formal declaration ceremony was held in the Grand Hall, with the full council and representatives from all the major bloodlines in attendance. Word had spread quickly, and the chamber was more crowded than usual. Curiosity about the king's mortal mate drew vampires from across the territory. Beatrice stood beside Yvain on the dais, wearing a dress he'd had made for her deep burgundy silk that complemented her coloring beautifully. She looked nervous but determined, her hand steady in his. "I, Yvain Jordanou, King of the Eastern Territories, do hereby declare Beatrice Rosewood as my chosen mate and consort," he announced, his voice carrying through the vast chamber. "She carries my authority and my protection. Any who harm her answer to me. Any who disrespect her disrespect their king. She is mine, and I am hers, until death parts us." The final phrase was traditional, though in their case, it carried additional weight. Death would part them, her death, in the handful of decades she had remaining. "Do you accept this bond?" he asked Beatrice, following the ritual. "I do," she said clearly. "I accept Yvain Jordanou as my mate, with all the responsibilities and joys that entails." As tradition demanded, he bit his own wrist and offered it to her. This wouldn't turn her that required much more than a few drops of blood, but it would forge a connection between them, would allow him to sense her if she was in danger. Beatrice didn't hesitate. She took his wrist and drank, her face briefly twisting at the taste before she pulled away. Yvain felt the bond snap into place, a golden thread connecting his consciousness to hers. He could feel her heartbeat, sense her emotions, know her location anywhere in the world. The assembled vampires stood in acknowledgement, and the ceremony was complete. Later, after the formal reception had ended, and they were alone in his quarters, Beatrice collapsed onto the ornate sofa and laughed. "That was intense. Do you know how many vampires told me they'd kill me if I hurt you?" "Several, I imagine." Yvain sat beside her, pulling her against him. "How do you feel?" "The blood bond can be disorienting at first." "I can feel you," she said wonderingly, "like there's a warm spot in my chest that's connected to you. Is this what you feel?" "Yes, it means I'll always be able to find you. If you're ever in danger, I'll know." She snuggled closer, and they sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Beatrice spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "The restaurant's really going to close. I got the final notice yesterday. 3 more weeks and I'll lose the lease." Yvain had been expecting this. Despite his financial support offered as payment for his meals, not charity, the restaurant's debts were too large and its customer base too small to sustain it. "Then let it close," he said gently, "and open something new. Something better." "With what money?" "With mine. As an investment in my mate's business. We'll do it properly this time. Better location, proper marketing, everything you need to succeed." Beatrice pulled back to look at him. "That's too much. I can't accept that." "Why not?" I have more wealth than I could spend in several lifetimes. Let me use it to help you achieve your dream. Because I need to do this myself. I need to know that I succeeded on my own merits, not because I'm sleeping with a vampire king." Yvain considered this. He understood pride, he'd built his entire reign on it, but he also understood practicality. What if we structure it as a legitimate business arrangement? You create a proposal, I evaluate it as an investor, and we proceed based on standard business terms. That way, you're not accepting charity. You're accepting investment based on your skills and potential. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Would you actually reject my proposal if it wasn't good enough? Without hesitation, I didn't become wealthy by making bad investments. She laughed. Okay, that's fair. I'll put together a proposal and you evaluate it honestly. If you think it's worth investing in, we'll move forward. Deal. He kissed her softly. Though I should warn you, I'm a very demanding investor. I'll expect regular reports and quality control tastings. Quality control tastings? Someone has to make sure the food is up to standard, and since I'm the only vampire who can actually taste your cooking, the duty falls to me. Beatrice's proposal was submitted 2 weeks later, and it was impressive. She'd clearly put serious thought into every aspect: location analysis, target demographic, menu concepts, staffing plans, and detailed financial projections. She proposed a more upscale establishment than her previous restaurant, focusing on seasonal ingredients and intimate dining experiences. Yvain reviewed it with the same critical eye he'd apply to any business venture. He found a few weak points: her marketing budget was too conservative, and her timeline for profitability was optimistic, but overall, it was solid. He approved the investment with modifications, and they began planning the new restaurant in earnest. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Beatrice found a location in a better neighborhood and worked with architects to design the space. Yvain used his connections to cut through bureaucratic red tape and secure necessary permits. Together, they interviewed staff, refined the menu, and prepared for the opening. Throughout it all, their relationship deepened. Yvain had never experienced anything like this: the mundane joy of planning a future with someone, of building something together. He helped Beatrice choose paint colors and argued with her about furniture. He sat through countless food tastings, offering his opinion on every dish. And every night, she came to him, to his world beneath the city, and they talked and laughed and loved each other with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Both of them were aware of the clock ticking, of the finite nature of their time together. It was Beatrice who finally brought up the question that neither of them had wanted to address. They were lying in his bed, an enormous four-poster that had once belonged to a French king, when she spoke into the darkness. "How long do we have?" Yvain didn't pretend to misunderstand. "You're 27 now. Humans in good health typically live to their 70s or 80s, so perhaps 50 or 60 years. That's not very long, not for you." "It's long enough." He pulled her closer, breathing in her scent. "I've lived for 500 years, Beatrice. Most of it has been empty existence, going through the motions of ruling without really feeling anything. The few months I've had with you have been worth more than all those centuries combined. But what happens after, when I'm gone? I carry on. I continue ruling, fulfilling my duties to my people. I remember you." His voice roughened. "I remember every moment we had together, and know that I was lucky to have experienced real love, even if only for a brief time. Will you take another consort? After?" "No." The answer was immediate and absolute. "You're my mate, Beatrice. There won't be another. There couldn't be." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "What if I wanted to be turned? Not now, but eventually. What if I wanted to stay with you?" Yvain's entire body tensed. "We've discussed this. I know what you said, that you won't curse me with immortality, that you want to preserve my humanity. But what about what I want? What if I want to be with you forever?" "You don't understand what you'd be giving up." "Don't." She pushed herself up to look at him, her eyes fierce in the darkness. "Don't patronize me by claiming I don't understand. I've spent months in your world. I've learned your laws, met your people, seen what being a vampire means. I understand exactly what I'd be giving up and what I'd be gaining." "You'd be giving up sunlight. You'd never see a dawn again. Never feel warm sand beneath your feet on a beach. Never walk through a park on a summer afternoon. I'd also be giving up death. I'd be giving up the certainty that I'll age and weaken and eventually leave you. I'd be giving up the pain of knowing our time is limited. You'd have to feed on blood. You'd become a predator. You feed on donated blood. You've taught me that it's possible to be a vampire without being a monster. Yvain sat up, running his hands through his white hair in frustration. Why are you pushing this? We agreed. We didn't agree to anything. You decided, and I went along with it because I was new to all of this. But I've been thinking about it for months now, and I don't want to be mortal anymore. I don't want to grow old and die while you stay young and perfect. I don't want to leave you alone. Better that than curse you to eternal existence as a creature of the night. It's not a curse if it's my choice. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Yvain, I love you. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. And I want forever with you. Not 50 years, not 60, forever. Why won't you give me that? Because he was terrified. Terrified that if he turned her, she'd eventually come to resent him for it. Terrified that she'd regret giving up her humanity and blame him. Terrified that she'd change, become someone different, and the woman he loved would be lost to him anyway. But looking into her eyes, seeing the absolute certainty there, he realized something. This wasn't about him protecting her. This was about him being afraid to trust that she knew her own mind. It's irreversible, he said quietly. Once you're turned, there's no going back. You'd be a vampire for eternity. I know. You could learn to hate me, hate what I made you. Or I could love you for giving me forever with you. The turning process is agonizing. 3 days of pain as your body dies and reforms. Many don't survive it. You'd make sure I did. You're the oldest, most powerful vampire I've ever met. If anyone could turn someone safely, it's you. He couldn't argue with that. The king's blood was the strongest, and his success rate with turning others was near perfect. When? He asked finally, accepting the inevitable. Not yet. Let me have the restaurant opening first. Let me accomplish that as a human, something I did on my own. And then, she smiled, then give me eternity. The restaurant opened 6 months after Beatrice had submitted her proposal, and it was an immediate success. Named The Harvest, a nod to the autumn colors. Yvain always associated with Beatrice, it quickly became one of the city's most sought-after reservations. The food was extraordinary, the atmosphere intimate, and word spread quickly about the chef's remarkable talent. Yvain attended the opening night, arriving late and staying in the shadows as much as possible. He watched Beatrice work the room, greeting guests and accepting compliments with gracious humility. She was radiant, glowing with pride and accomplishment. When the last customer finally left and the staff had cleaned up, Beatrice found him waiting in the kitchen. "We did it," she said, exhaustion and joy mixing in her voice. "It actually worked." "You did it," he corrected. "This was your vision, your talent. I just provided capital." She moved into his arms and he held her close, feeling her heartbeat still mortal, still temporary against his chest. "I'm ready," she whispered. "Are you certain?" "Completely." They chose the next night, wanting to give Beatrice time to put her affairs in order. She met with her lawyers, updated her will, and wrote letters to the few people in her life who mattered: friends from culinary school, a distant cousin, her restaurant staff. She didn't tell them the truth, of course. As far as the mortal world would know, Beatrice Rosewood was taking an extended vacation abroad to study international cuisine. The restaurant would continue operating under her sous chef, with Beatrice maintaining ownership, but staying away for several months while she adjusted to her new existence. When night fell, Beatrice came to Yvain's quarters beneath the city. She wore simple clothes jeans and a soft sweater and carried nothing but her determination. "Last chance to change your mind," Yvain said, though his heart wasn't in the warning. "Not a chance." She kissed him fiercely. "Make me yours, forever." The turning process was exactly as brutal as he'd warned. Yvain bit her throat, draining her blood until her heart stuttered and stopped. Then he cut his own wrist and fed her his blood, forcing the ancient power into her dying body. For 3 days, Beatrice lay in his bed, writhing in agony as her body died and reformed. Yvain stayed with her every moment, holding her through the worst of it, feeding her more of his blood when necessary, whispering promises and reassurances that she probably couldn't hear. Lucian and Meridiana took turns guarding the door, ensuring they weren't disturbed. The council was informed that the king's mate was undergoing her transformation and that any interruptions would be met with lethal force. On the third day, as dawn approached in the world above, Beatrice's eyes opened. They were crimson now, glowing with the power of vampire kind. Her skin had paled to alabaster, and her hair had begun the transformation to white that marked all of their kind. Yvain? Her voice was different, stronger, carrying resonances that mortal vocal cords couldn't produce. I'm here. He gathered her into his arms, relief flooding through him. She'd survived. She was vampire. She was his forever. Everything's so bright, so loud. I can hear people moving in other parts of the complex. I can smell blood from somewhere far away. She looked at her hands, studying the pale skin. Is it always like this? You'll learn to control it. The heightened senses, the strength, all of it. I'll teach you. She turned to him, and he saw the moment she truly registered what she'd become. Tears red, tears now, tinged with blood slid down her cheeks. I'm a vampire. Yes. And we have forever. Yes. She kissed him, and it was different now. She was stronger, more durable. He didn't have to hold back, didn't have to fear hurting her. When she bit his lip, drawing blood, they both tasted it and felt the connection between them intensify. I need to feed, she said when they broke apart. I can feel the hunger. I know. Come with me. He took her to the feeding chambers where donated blood was stored in temperature-controlled units. It was less satisfying than feeding directly from a living source, but it was ethical and safe. Beatrice drank deeply, and he watched her adjust to this new aspect of her existence. When she finished, she looked at him with wonder. I can taste it, really taste it. Not like when I was human. This is different, richer, more complex. That's the vampire senses. Everything is more intense now. She experimented over the following weeks, testing her new abilities. She was fast, though not as fast as Yvain. She was strong, capable of crushing steel with her bare hands. She could hear heartbeats from blocks away, could sense the flow of blood through living bodies. And yes, she could still cook. The Grand Hall's kitchens became her domain, and she prepared elaborate meals that she could no longer fully enjoy. But Yvain could taste them, and that was enough for her. She was formally presented to the court as Yvain's mate and consort, this time as a true vampire rather than a fragile human. The response was mixed. Some welcomed her, others remained skeptical, but no one openly challenged her right to stand beside their king. Severin, surprisingly, became one of her defenders. He approached her after the presentation ceremony with something like respect in his ancient eyes. You gave up mortality for him, he said. That takes courage. I gave up mortality for us, Beatrice corrected. I wanted forever with him. Most humans wouldn't make that choice. They're too attached to their sunlight and their mortality. He studied her. You'll make a good queen, I think. If he ever has the sense to formally marry you. That was the first time anyone had mentioned marriage, and it gave Beatrice ideas. She brought it up with Yvain a few months after her transformation, once she'd adjusted to her new existence. They were in his quarters, lying together in the peaceful quiet that came after feeding. The bond between them had only grown stronger. Since her turning, she could sense his emotions as clearly as he could sense hers. Marry me, she said. Yvain lifted his head to look at her. Are you proposing to me? Yes. And before you argue that we're already mated and bonded, I know. But I want the formal ceremony. I want to stand before your people and the world and declare that we're choosing each other. Vampire marriages are complex affairs. There are rituals and ceremonies that span multiple nights. Then we'll do them, all of them. I want everyone to know that the vampire king is mine. He smiled, and it was rare and beautiful. I've been yours since the night I wept over your beef stew. Then make it official. The wedding was held 3 months later, a grand affair that combined vampire traditions with elements from mortal ceremonies. Representatives came from all the vampire territories, even the western and southern clans that had once opposed Yvain's rule. Beatrice wore a dress of black silk, shot through with burgundy threads, and her white hair was crowned with a diadem of rubies. Yvain wore the formal regalia of the Vampire Kings, ancient and magnificent, marked with symbols of power that predated recorded history. The ceremony lasted for 3 nights, each night representing a different aspect of their union. The first night was for blood. They exchanged vows and blood, strengthening the bond between them until it was unbreakable. The second night was for power. Beatrice was formally elevated to queen, given authority equal to Yvain's within their territory. The third night was for joy, a celebration with music and dancing and blood wine, a feast that lasted until dawn approached. When it was over, when they finally retreated to their private quarters as king and queen, rather than just king and consort, Yvain pulled Beatrice close and marveled at how far they'd come. From that first night when he'd wept over a simple meal to this moment, rulers together of an ancient kingdom, partners in every sense of the word. "No regrets?" he asked, though he could feel through their bond that she had none. "Not one," she confirmed. "This is exactly where I want to be. Even though you gave up the sun, I gained the stars, and you. That's more than enough." They ruled together for decades that stretched into centuries. Beatrice proved to be a remarkably effective queen, bringing a compassion to vampire politics that had been largely absent. She pushed for reforms in feeding practices, established programs to provide donated blood to younger vampires who struggled with control, and created laws that protected mortals from vampire predation. Some of the older vampires grumbled about these changes, but Yvain supported her completely. Together, they transformed the Eastern Territories from a kingdom ruled by fear into one ruled by respect and honor. The harvest continued operating for years before Beatrice finally closed it, claiming that the chef had decided to retire. By then, her former sous chef had taken over completely, and the restaurant maintained its reputation for excellence. Beatrice herself occasionally cooked for Yvain, preparing elaborate meals in their private quarters that he alone could taste. It became their ritual once a week. She would spend hours in the kitchen, and he would sit at their table and savor every bite while she told him about her week, her ideas, her dreams for their kingdom. They faced challenges, of course, rival clans that needed to be negotiated with or fought, internal politics that required careful navigation, the occasional vampire hunter who got too close to discovering their realm. But they faced it all together, king and queen, mates and partners, bound by love and blood and choice. And on quiet nights, when the kingdom was settled and their duties were fulfilled, Yvain would hold his queen close and remember the night he'd first tasted her cooking and wept for the humanity he'd thought lost forever. She'd given him more than the ability to taste food. She'd given him hope, purpose, love. She'd given him a reason to exist beyond mere survival. In return, he'd given her eternity. And together, they'd built something beautiful, a love that transcended death, a partnership that would endure for as long as either of them existed. The poor chef who'd cooked one warm meal for the Vampire King had become a queen herself, and the Vampire King who'd wept over simple beef stew had found his salvation. It was, by any measure, a happy ending, the kind that lasted forever.